We're talking about The Lord of the Rings here.
Welcome, comrades, to the art of cinema. I am Colonel T, your Minister of Propaganda.
And I am your glorious leader, General Secretary F. Colonel, we have reached number 1 on our list of the top 10 films of the 2000s.
Yes, sir, it's very exciting. At number 1 on our list is The Lord of the Rings,
which we're treating as a single 13.5-hour film, even though it was released in 3 installments.
We're going to have to condense the story considerably, sir, to cover it on an episode of The Art of Cinema, but here we go. It all starts for Frodo Baggins in the Shire, which is where most of the hobbits live.
Now, hobbits, are those like Care Bears?
Yes, sir. Hobbits are essentially rural English people who are only about 4 feet tall and have large, hairy feet that don't require shoes.
Like a Care Bear.
Frodo lives with his uncle, Bilbo Baggins, who's preparing a party for his 111th birthday. Gandalf the Wizard visits the Shire for Bilbo's birthday, and at the party, Bilbo uses a magic ring he has to disappear in front of all his guests and skip town. Before Bilbo leaves, Gandalf convinces him to leave the magic ring behind. Gandalf is suspicious that Bilbo's ring might be much more important than just a party gag. So Gandalf gives the ring to Frodo for safekeeping after Bilbo leaves, and then goes to investigate this magic ring.
Colonel, the workers and soldiers of the PRF must understand that Frodo Baggins is about to embark upon the hero's journey, as Joseph Campbell and others have described it. That's interesting, because I have also been on the hero's journey. That's how I ended up as your glorious leader. This first part of the story represents the ordinary world. Frodo is unaware of the path that lies before him, just like me during my college years. I was oblivious in those days to the fact that soon, after I'd read some books about political ideology, I would implement the revolution and rise to the highest level of political power here in the PRF, delivering the people from capitalist imperialist oppression by way of atrocity.
Gandalf learns that the ring is, in fact, the most important of magic rings. Sauron, the story's primary antagonist, bound his spirit to the ring and imbued it with much of his power. So if Sauron manages to reclaim this ring, which has been lost to him for thousands of years, he'll become all but unstoppable and will lead an army of darkness to conquer the world.
What? Sauron, is he a ghost?
That's Casper.
Okay, all right.
Casper, a friendly ghost, by the way.
Well, that's what he'd like you to believe.
Gandalf explains to his mentor, the wizard Saruman, that he's found the Great Ring. But Saruman has been seeking the ring for himself and has been corrupted by Sauron, so he imprisons Gandalf. But Gandalf is able to escape, and he goes back to the Shire to tell Frodo that Sauron's minions will soon find the Shire and take the ring. Frodo must travel to Rivendell, an elf capital in Middle-earth, where they'll be safe and able to decide what to do with the ring.
This is the call to adventure in the hero's journey. My own call to adventure came when I read the works of Marx and Lenin and realized that their ideology failed to fully account for atrocity. You see, Colonel, for Marx and Lenin, atrocity was an unfortunate byproduct. It was collateral damage. They did not understand that atrocity is, in fact, the engine of progress, the tool by which a glorious leader, in his genius, sculpts the utopia out of a society. I could see that somebody needed to take over a country and implement a Marxism that embraced atrocity as its most important tool.
Yes, sir. But how did you respond to this revelation, this epiphany?
Well, at first I refused the call to adventure, Colonel, to my great shame. I second-guessed myself initially. Who was I to take over a nation and forcibly deliver its people unto the utopia? But then I saw young people wearing Che Guevara t-shirts, and I was intrigued by their adulation of the iconic Marxist. So I traveled to the Bolivian jungle to track Guevara down and ask his advice. I found him, and he promptly had my entire entourage killed. He saved me to kill last. But I was able to escape when Guevara and his troops were attacked and distracted by CIA-sponsored Bolivian soldiers. So it was Che Guevara's example that made me understand that one man can take over a country, and that yes, the counter-revolutionaries must be cut down before progress may be achieved.
Very good, sir. Let's see if Frodo Baggins will respond similarly once he's met with his mentors. Frodo leaves the Shire with 3 friends of his, 3 other hobbits, to travel in secret to Rivendell. They narrowly escape wraiths disguised as horsemen in black.
The ring wraiths are the Mordor secret police, in other words.
The hobbits also meet a human character named Aragorn, a soldier and woodsman who guides and protects them on the way to Rivendell. At Rivendell, a council of elves, men, dwarves, hobbits, and Gandalf the Wizard decide that the ring must be taken back to the place it was forged and destroyed. Because Sauron has bound his spirit to the ring, he will be rendered powerless if the ring is destroyed. These characters are tempted to use the ring themselves. They think they could wield its power and use it against Sauron, but wiser members of the council know that anyone who tries to use the ring for himself will only be corrupted and ensnared by Sauron.
Boromir in particular is tempted to use the ring. Boromir comes from Minas Tirith, the White City in Gondor, which borders Mordor. Gondor has been fighting a losing battle against Mordor, as Mordor's strength has increased through recent generations. To be perfectly honest, Colonel, I would have liked to have seen Boromir get the ring and use it. I certainly had no qualms about using our nuclear arsenal to vanquish my political rivals.
You used the nukes to demonstrate your resolve, to exhibit your tenacity, to give a demonstration of your fixity of purpose.
Yes, I did. And what's interesting, Colonel, is that where other nations are going to get very upset if the PRF nukes other nations, the fact is that they really don't mind when the PRF nukes itself. If I were to nuke Washington, D.C., there'd be hell to pay. But when I nuke counter-revolutionaries here in the People's Republic of F, the Americans wrote some nasty things in their newspapers, but they didn't do anything about it.
You've discovered a useful loophole in the system of capitalist-imperialist morality, sir.
Capitalist-imperialist morality? That's an oxymoron.
A fellowship of 9 companions is sent from Rivendell to take the ring to Mordor and destroy it. There's the 4 hobbits, Gandalf the Wizard, Gimli the Dwarf, Legolas the Elf, and Boromir. During their journey, Gandalf is killed by a powerful demon in a dwarf city under a mountain range, and as the Fellowship continues towards Mordor afterwards, they're pursued by a powerful army created by Saruman, the fallen wizard who's in league with Sauron.
Gandalf is killed? That's a real blow to the Fellowship. If there was a glorious leader in this story, it was Gandalf.
Boromir, the human member of the Fellowship, is seduced by the ring's power. He attempts to take the ring from Frodo, who narrowly escapes and realizes he'll have to take the ring to Mordor on his own. If he stays with the Fellowship, the rest of them will eventually succumb to the ring's power. But his friend Sam won't abandon him, so the two of them end up leaving the rest of the Fellowship to try to find a way into Mordor on their own to destroy the ring.
This is the tests, allies, and enemies stage of the hero's journey. The hero must learn through hard experience who he can trust and who he can't trust. If Frodo's story goes the way mine did, he's going to realize that he can't trust anyone. That's why Frodo will need to establish a secret police and require the people of Middle-earth to spy on their neighbors and report anything suspicious to the secret police, which will be difficult to do because they are secret, so people won't know where to find them. But just trust me, they're out there, probably in your home right now.
Inside the walls, yes sir.
Listening through your vents, digging through your garbage.
Some guy underneath the drain in your sink.
Watching you shower, ladies. You know what I'm saying?
While Frodo and Sam travel to Mordor, the remnant of the Fellowship must decide what to do now that their original mission has failed. Merry and Pippin, the 2 other hobbits, were captured by Saruman's army, so all that remains of the Fellowship now is Aragorn the man, Gimli the dwarf, and Legolas the elf. They decide to pursue Saruman's army to rescue Merry and Pippin. They end up having extensive dealings with human kingdoms that have been weakened and divided by Sauron's rising power in the world. Gandalf is resurrected after fighting the demon in the dwarf city under the mountains, so he returns to lead what remains of the Fellowship, much to everyone's relief. Gandalf is even more powerful as a wizard now. He leads what's left of the Fellowship to try to reunite the scattered world of men and prepare them to defend against the army Sauron is about to send out to conquer the world. The great battle happens at Minas Tirith, the capital of Gondor. Middle-earth's forces of good are able to hold off Sauron's army at its first attack, but Sauron has far greater forces yet to be sent forth. The only hope for our heroes is that Frodo and Sam manage to destroy the ring before Sauron launches the bulk of his army.
We can interpret Gandalf's resurrection as a metaphor for the glorious leadership being passed from father to son here in the People's Republic of F.
What do you mean, sir?
I'm glad you asked, Colonel. You'll remember my father, General Secretary E. When he died, the glorious leadership of the PRF died with him. But the next day, When I was installed as the next General Secretary, the PRF's glorious leadership was resurrected in the person of me, your glorious leader, General Secretary F.
So that's like Gandalf in The Lord of the Rings.
Exactly. Glorious leader of the people. This is a title fit for a brutal dictator who, being the apotheosis of goodness, loves and chastens his people and labors in dark, ominous chambers for their deliverance from the original sin of seeking their own private property.
After Frodo and Sam left the Fellowship, they realized that they were being pursued by a creature named Gollum. Gollum had once been very much like a hobbit, but he'd recovered the lost ring from the bottom of a river and fallen victim to its power. Those who possess the ring become so enamored with it that it's all they think of. Its magic is an addictive power that entraps them. So Gollum took the ring into caves in the mountains and was consumed by its magic, guarding the ring there for 500 years. It had been Bilbo Baggins who, purely by chance, or perhaps not chance, but a white magic to oppose the ring's black magic, stumbled into Gollum's lair and took the ring after Gollum had lost it.
Gollum was corrupted by the ring, just like the Americans were corrupted by capitalism and imperialism, Colonel.
So Gollum catches up to Frodo and Sam, but they're ready for him. They subdue him, and since Gollum knows the way into Mordor, they compel him to guide them there. Gollum agrees to guide Frodo and Sam, but he plots against them in his effort to reclaim the ring for himself. Since Frodo is gradually starting to succumb to the ring's power, very much like Gollum himself had long before, Gollum is able to start convincing Frodo that his friend Sam is actually plotting to steal the ring. So Frodo eventually turns on Sam and tells him to go back home. Frodo and Gollum continue on their way into Mordor, but Gollum leads Frodo into the lair of a huge spider-like monster in an effort to have him killed. Sam is still following and rescues Frodo, and they're able to get rid of Gollum for the time being as they enter into Mordor.
Here we have the approach to the inmost cave in the hero's journey. In my case, this wasn't about finding a way into Mordor and approaching Mount Doom. For me, the inmost cave was a philosophical battleground. We might even call it a metaphysical confrontation, as it were. I had to approach our country's military generals and convince them to support my superior ideological vision.
Did the generals support your vision?
No, they didn't. But I was able to buy their loyalty using money and the promise of much more money to come after we'd seized power.
A noble and inspiring story, sir, much like Frodo's.
That's why they call it the hero's journey.
Frodo and Sam managed to evade Sauron's armies and walk to Mount Doom, where the ring was forged. They go to the enchanted chamber inside the volcano where the ring was forged, so Frodo can destroy it. But once it comes to it, Frodo finds that he can't destroy the ring. Its magic has ensnared Frodo as it once did Gollum, so Frodo turns to leave and keep the ring for himself. But Gollum has been following them, and he attacks Frodo, taking the ring from him. Frodo and Gollum struggle, and Gollum falls into the fire, destroying both himself and the ring. Sauron immediately loses all his power, his fortress collapses, and without his magic to keep them in line, Sauron's army falls into confusion and disarray. The soldiers in the army of darkness lay down their weapons and run away, which works out great for our heroes, because Sauron's forces were just about to destroy what was left of the Gondor army and the other members of the Fellowship.
It reminds me of the Battle of New F City, when our brave, noble soldiers defeated the sinister, brainwashed American Special Forces Brigade.
They're strikingly similar, yes sir.
That's right. All we had to do was set up loudspeakers so the American troops could hear us. Then we simply broadcast PRF propaganda recordings like this one you're listening to right now. And as the American soldiers heard us explain our vastly superior political ideology, as they realized the folly of their capitalist imperialist way of life, they laid down their guns and ran. The Americans ran out of shame, Colonel.
The Americans ran because there is only one true political ideology, and our propaganda proved that for their whole lives, the Americans had lived according to the wrong one.
Yes, the Americans ran because the wicked flee when no man pursueth, because the wages of capitalism and imperialism is death. But the free gift of your glorious leader, General Secretary F, is a life of equity in the utopia that is the People's Republic of F.
Frodo and Sam are reunited with Merry and Pippin at Minas Tirith, and there's a whole other plot line about Aragorn being the rightful king of Gondor. So Aragorn is crowned king, and there's much rejoicing. The hobbits travel back to the Shire. They're much changed by their adventures in the wider world, but Frodo in particular. The cross he's had to bear as a ring-bearer has scarred him, and he finds that even once he's returned home, he can't go back to his old way of life as the other hobbits are able to. So at the end, the 4 hobbits travel to the western shore of Middle-earth, to a place called the Grey Havens, where Frodo tells the 3 others that he's leaving with Gandalf and others for the Undying Lands, the realm of the elves who are all leaving Middle-earth. It's very sad for Frodo's friends, but he no longer has a place amongst them. I first read the Lord of the Rings books about 4 years before the first of these 3 films was released in theaters. I loved the books immediately, like most other people I knew who'd read them. So when we heard that an unknown director from New Zealand was working on an adaptation, we all had pretty low expectations for the upcoming movies. There was simply too much in those books for any film adaptation to cover, and we were sure that the usual Hollywood bullshit would get mixed into Tolkien's story and spoil it. So when I saw The Fellowship of the Ring, it was an almost religious experience. It was so well done, it was hard to believe it. The Fellowship of the Ring is the only movie I've gone back to see in the theaters over and over again. I probably saw it 12 or 15 times while it was still in theaters in 2001 and 2002. It started off with gripping scenes of historical exposition with Galadriel's monologue narration. You leaned forward and thought, hey, this is really good. Then there's the beginning of the story as Gandalf visits the Shire, and those scenes are just as good. At that point you were thinking to yourself, if it keeps being this good, these movies will be unbelievable. And unbelievable they are, sir. They're not perfect films. I think Peter Jackson overdoes the comic relief, and characters such as Gimli the Dwarf and Meriadoc the Hobbit really pay the price for it. There's also the stormtrooper problem with Sauron's army. The orcs and even the Uruk-hai are way too easy to defeat. I know that's in the books too, but I think the enemy army should have been much more formidable. Great works of art aren't great because they're perfect, though. They're great because their virtues are so meaningful as to make their flaws worth overlooking. That's certainly the case here in film history's greatest trilogy.
You noted 2 flaws in these films, Colonel. The overdone comic relief and the stormtrooper problem with the orcs. Let me identify a 3rd flaw. The story. You see, Frodo gets it all wrong. Early on, once Gandalf had explained the power of the ring to Frodo, Frodo should have put the ring on at once. He should have started learning to wield its power. And then Frodo should have gone to the University of the Shire, preaching Marxist-Leninist ethist ideology at the student union and during the daily riots at the political science department. Having been radicalized, the students would have been unified by the potency and beauty of the ethist dogma. And yes, also the power of the ring.
Certainly.
Because we're talking about the Lord of the Rings here. Now, the Shire students could have then traveled to the University of Gondor at Minas Tirith campus and begun holding demonstrations and riots there. They would make the workers of Gondor understand that they were being exploited by a Denethor regime that had grown fat off the fruit of their labor. Furthermore, Frodo and his band of radicals would explain to the Gondorians that Mordor to the east, far from being a threat, offers them the key to revolution in Sauron, the one figure in the story powerful enough to serve as a glorious leader. For Sauron, once he had the ring, could institute Marxism-Leninism-Effism. No ideology in socio-political history has been as revolutionary as Marxism-Leninism-Effism. It's the most radical ideology, tempered in the fires that burn in the hearts of the revolutionary workers here in the People's Republic of F, as well as worldwide. Dogmatically pure F-ism is creative F-ism. It not only explains the world, it explains how PRF workers, in obsequious obedience to their glorious leader, can transform the world.
Workers and soldiers of the People's Republic of F, The Lord of the Rings is number 1 on our list of the 10 best movies of the 2000s. This has been The Art of Cinema with our glorious leader, General Secretary F. Let us maintain vigilance against the ever-looming threat of an American invasion. You are required to report any non-participation or dissent amongst your comrades. Don't forget to tune into The Art of Cinema again next time. We'll begin our list of the top 10 films of the 1990s in your next mandatory re-education session.